tell you about my experience discovering Bob James, okay? Bob James, the first record I heard was in the mid-'70s. It was an instrumental version on the radio of Roberta Flack's Feel Like Making Love, right? And this thing was so cool. And I was instantly a Bob James fan. And people asked me, man, what do you think about that Bob James? I said, man, that brother's bad, right? The album was that on your one album, Bob?
That was on one.
So the album cover for one didn't have anybody's face. It had a beautiful piece of artwork. It looked like a lion or something like that. So man, I'm thinking Bob James, he's bad brother from Detroit or something like that. I'm not gonna lie, right? It's so soulful, you know. And then, wait a minute, Bob, let me get into this. And then,
you might not want to get too deep.
Wait, no, I'm gonna get deep. Because then, Mr. Magic, Grover Washington's Mr. Magic came out. Okay? Do y'all remember Mr. Magic? Okay, well, the guy who put it all together, Ralph McDonald, a famous producer and percussionist, wrote the tune, but the guy who arranged it, who put it together, who told everybody what to play, was that bad brother from Detroit.
Absolutely.
Bob James.
You definitely have to tell that story, Bob,
yeah.
about how that thing came. It took a long time to be called brother. Worked on it pretty hard. And he's right. In that era, Detroit was kind of like the opposite problem because I didn't have any problem getting a gig there. But when I showed up on stage, I was a little bit of a problem.
Hey man, hey, Bob James called me for a record date. This is the first time I was going to meet him. And I stood right next to him waiting for Bob James to show up. Hey man, where's Bob coming?
It's not an exaggeration for me to be able to say what a big compliment that was in that era. And times have changed in many ways in this regard, and now we're in the post-Obama, or in the middle of the Obama. There's not a stigma in both directions, or in either direction, and I think it's due to a lot of us who have just open minds, and people that I respected the most, the musicians that I respected, had that open mind. They just listened to the music, and it didn't make any difference what you looked like. It was what you sounded like, I think.
Where are you from? Where did you get started?
I was born in Missouri, little town, Marshall. I think my buddy was also born in the same state. St. Louis, right?
Yeah, I'm from St. Louis.
I grew up in St. Louis. He was from the big city, St. Louis. I only got to go, when I through high school, I only got to go to St. Louis a couple of times. That was the real big city. Marshall, Missouri had 8,000 people in it. And they didn't kind of know what jazz was. So I was listening to recordings and just little by little. I didn't really find out that much about it until I got to college, and that was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Made many visits into Detroit to listen to so many people there.
See, I told you. I knew Detroit had something to do with it.
There was the Jones brothers, Andrea Marcus, and Yusuf Lateef. Great artists that came out of Detroit. I really learned a lot from that. But just a little bit on the history of back to 1974. Yes, Creed Taylor did not want my picture on the cover, and he made no bones about it. My white face was not going to add any sales to it. So he hung in, so he put this gargoyle sort of door knocker thing on the cover. That was the first record, and the second record, kind of the same thing. It was sort of a rainbow graphic, no picture. And finally he got up the guts on my third record to put sort of image of me, but he reversed it. It was a kind of black background with white. No. So still, nobody kind of really knew it.
He gradually stepped people into it.
So 4 years later, on my fourth record, he finally stuck my face out there.
And sales plummeted.
It's been that way ever since.
did a lot of arranging work in the 60s and in the early 70s before you made your first album, right? What kind of stuff were you doing now?
Well, my biggest claim to fame then was I had a second college education by working with Sanborn. That's right. I was her music director and arranger and pianist for about 5 years in the mid-1960s. And I learned so much. Among other things, I will say that I learned that I love being an accompanist. Even more so than being the lead guy soloing. I feel power at the piano, and when I've got somebody like a Dave Sanborn playing that melody, I know I can sneak in underneath him, I know I can support him, and I think he's still hiring me, so I think I made him sound better too.